Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. COVID-19 obviously has affected several sectors of the economy. But when you talk about mobile telephony business, how are things going to look like going forward? What will change? For us to discuss a topic like this, well, we're in a better position to engage one of the biggest players in this mobile telephony business. We're talking about MTN, also engaging as chief executive. How are things going to look like going forward? What would change when it comes to mobile telephony business, engaging customers? Now that the majority of subscribers and even companies and businesses want to work from home, what is MTN going to do for us? What will change? All these things wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition. My name is George and I'll be engaging the chief executive of MTN Ghana. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. As you look at mobile telephony business going forward, what is going to change? Will COVID-19 really change everything? Or well, it will be business as usual? Well, engaging or looking at a topic like this, we're privileged to engage the Chief Executive of MTN Ghana, Madadivo. Sir, thank you so much for engaging us in your nice office. I like the place.
Thank you, George, and thanks to your listeners as well.
How has business been for you now in the COVID-19 era? Has it been that tough, smooth, or, we know how to weather the storms in times like this?
Right, well, thank you, and it's a very good and appropriate question. Obviously, COVID-19 is, a global pandemic, unprecedented, and it presents a lot of challenging circumstances. And let me start outside of the telecoms business, just from the standpoint of our consumers. And what our consumers would experience in terms of a lockdown with loss of livelihoods or loss of jobs. The biggest impact is your discretionary spend. And in as much as telecoms is a critical national service to ensure we have communication and we can continue to be productive as an economy, as an operator, our first priority is to think about how do we continue to present and deliver this service, which is a critical national service, especially in a time like a pandemic. So our first thinking was really, do we have the right infrastructure? Do we have the right capacity? Can we guarantee the right levels of service? And how do we make sure that we don't add to the problems that COVID has introduced to our productivity as an economy? And also from the standpoint of our consumers, to ensure that we can keep them connected. So we spent a lot of time thinking about that specific question around infrastructure resilience, infrastructure availability, and what we can do in the time immediately to make these services available to continue to promote economic growth. So that was the first one. But the second one was, during the pandemic itself, we have to continue to deliver the service. And therefore, we have to have our teams and our people out working, ensuring that our sites are continuing to have fuel, they have power, they're up and running. Where we have disturbances or interruptions, we fix them. So that continuity of service meant that we had to take a slightly different approach when workers were going home to figure out how to keep these critical maintenance teams and our engineers continuing to work in a safe environment, so that as much as we're trying to deliver a service, we don't also risk the lives of our people and our vulnerable people. So quite a few things for us to think through as we're thinking about COVID, but primarily is to keep the service up and provide the service, the critical national service that we are, and make sure that keeps going.
Before I come and look at a situation where a George Uafe out there, or maybe an Ajomansa out there, despite COVID-19, she still wants to pick up her cell phone connected to MTN and continue making calls to take her mobile money wallet and continue to transact services with her friends and all the rest. How did you manage the people inside in trying to ensure that, whilst I also make sure that we manage COVID-19 spread, or even in the company, the subscriber out there doesn't care about COVID and he picks up his phone and he wants to make a call? How did you manage the people internally in ensuring that whilst you also make health the priority internally, the subscriber out there also want to make sure that I want an uninterrupted service?
Sure. So, I mean, service resilience is basically, for us, it was the number one priority. And you have different pillars of service resilience, right? The first one is the network is available. So my sites are up, they're fueled, and everything is working fine. But there'll be customers that have issues with their service, right? They pick up the phone to make a call, something happens, or they try to transact on mobile money and something happens and they have problems. So they also have to contact support services and try to get resolution of these problems. We immediately try to find a safe way for our call center to continue to operate as normal. With immediately 50% of our call center staff went home, and at the peak it was about 75% of our call center staff that were working from home. And we have two call centers. One is outsourced and one is in-house. In the in-house call center, we had 100% of our call center staff working from home, and in the outsourced one is about 75%. So that again allows customers to continue to have service, even though the environment within which the service was originating had changed completely. And that was probably one of the big revelations from COVID-19, our ability to adapt very quickly to what was happening. Coincidentally, we had a business disaster recovery simulation in February.
Were you anticipating a COVID-19 or something big? I know that in the aviation industry, they would do a simulation for crash, but that would not be a typical simulation that you want to do, or something that you do normally. That let's say one day all our cell sites are down, our connection internet is down. What should be the response of the group and even the local firm? Am I right? Or maybe help me with some education in terms of the simulation that you'd be doing as a telecoms company.
Sure. So absolutely. Look, it's important that in terms of business recovery, you just don't have the processes, but you also think about the behaviors that make the processes work. And to really test the human behaviors that, and the knowledge around these processes, a simulation is a recommended approach to do this, where you basically create a situation where you have to figure out who's going to respond first, who's going to call first, which number am I going to call from, how do I know I'm calling the right person, things like that, because we all have alternative numbers for situations that arise like that. This simulation itself is part of our risk management process. We have a simulation, we have a business risk management approach, and this was part of that process. So, I would love to say we anticipated COVID and we had all the answers and we did the simulation, but it wasn't about COVID. It was about our regular business and risk management practices, making sure that if an event does happen, we have a degree of readiness to allow us to continue to sustain the business and continue to deliver the services that we should. So that simulation, allowed us to go through what we do in a disaster situation, what we do in a crisis, and how we should coordinate as a team, really focusing on the behaviors. How do I interpret my role in managing all of this? If the customer picks up their phone and they don't have the service, it doesn't matter that there is a pandemic. Because at that point, the service availability arguably is even more important. Because now you can't just walk to someone and solve your problem. And your singular means of reaching someone is through these communication channels. So the premium on availability, arguably is much higher during the pandemic. And we had to make sure the availability was high enough for that. In terms of mobile money, there were obviously big challenges because part of the mobile money delivery has to do with interacting with an agent to fund your wallet. So of course, during lockdown, that was quite challenging where, agents couldn't necessarily go out and open their shops and work ordinarily. And, we had to rely very heavily on other digital transactions for people who have bank accounts or other means of receiving cash to use those channels to fund their wallets. And some of the agents within their communities as well could support people. But that was one of the big challenges. And we saw a significant drop in the amount of funds that people were able to put into their wallet. Of course, another driver is that a lot of people were not necessarily working. We have an informal economy where people go to work and they get money today, they put it in their wallet. That channel was completely cut off during the lockdown. And therefore, that channel to fund the wallet also added to the fact that you couldn't really transact during that period.
Sorry to cut in. I find this submission as an interesting revelation because when I look at the the other reports that were coming from Bank of Ghana and all the rest, it appears that, was it at the initial stages? Because we got the understanding from these figures that we saw a huge flow, maybe not just MTN, but even for the industry.
Sure.
As in, lots of people were transacting. I mean, I met people who told me that, George, listen, a friend calls me and it's like, I'm having challenges, lockdown. Can you send some money through the mobile money for me? That it was more of a lifesaver during this period.
Sure. So, yes, mobile money was absolutely, I mean, I can't imagine.
I believe you had a lot of calls from relatives who wanted you to send some, these are relatives, I should say, not friends, who wanted you to help them out during this lockdown.
Sure. So look, I can't imagine what managing through the lockdown would have been like without mobile money, right? I mean, absolute necessity at the time. If you look at what happened, from sort of mid-March to end of March, there was a huge spike in mobile money transactions. During that time, the restrictions had started. Schools were now at home, working from home, but we didn't have a lockdown. Agents were still working and people were still earning an income and they could fund their wallets. But people were more conscious and therefore the physical interactions had been reducing. And as a result of that, digital transactions went up significantly. During the lockdown, the trend changed. We started seeing a drop, okay? And for the 3 weeks of the lockdown, there was a significant drop, somewhere in the 15 to 20% reduction in total volumes transacted and total values transacted. Once the lockdown was lifted, we started seeing a slow recovery back to the levels we saw in March. So if you look at the aggregate figures over a period, there was absolutely a significant increase. And we've continued to see huge demand for more money services since that time. The growth has continued in terms of people's usage of more money wallets, the amount of times people would deposit into their account, and we've seen that frequency of usage in general go up. So the stats are correct, but there was a period within that spectrum where during the lockdown, the trends actually reduced over 15 to 20%.
Are you surprised as an operator, or you think that, no, George, we knew that it will come to the stage where there's now a lot of people doing transactions on mobile money? And I always put this thing to you because it's the fact that you are the biggest player in this industry, per what Bank of Ghana data has given to us and all the rest. Have you been surprised by the volumes of money moving on your platform? Or you look at M-Pesa and all the rest, and it's like, it's just a matter of time?
Look, it depends on what expectations you have, right? And you can look at the more money ecosystem today as a system that's fairly large if you look at the volumes of transactions that are going through. But let me give you a different perspective on the opportunity that we haven't as yet tapped in terms of that ecosystem. Today, on a monthly basis, we have somewhere around 10 million active customers for a population of 31 million, okay? Yes, a portion of that population are the age and therefore can't have an account. But if you categorize that 10 million, there's still a good 2/3 of the population that are not actively using a mobile money account today. And secondly, if you look at the volume of transactions per user per month, it's somewhere in the 5 transactions per month range. It's probably gone up a little bit now, with COVID and everything, but it's still close to that number. You compare that to a more mature market, Kenya, for example, and it's 4 to 5 times that number. So again, our ecosystem is still very immature. And the reason for that is, as a platform provider, MTN is a platform provider, you need the fintech ecosystem to develop around these platforms where a lot of the innovation comes from, okay? So things like lending, things like customized services for businesses, all these things will sit on that platform layer, which will have multiple players. And you start to expand that ecosystem. I mean, somebody could very easily develop a solution for paying taxi drivers, for example. That sits on top of the mobile money ecosystem. And when it happens, it means, a taxi driver doesn't have to, they can do very quick accounting of how much they earn during the day. They know which amount of money came from taxi payments versus which ones came from, a personal contribution to the driver. So these are all tools that today exist in Kenya for small businesses to use to manage their businesses. And it's all driven by the innovation from fintechs and other software development companies. So we have an ecosystem maturity challenge. And if we get excited about the amount of money that's going through the system today, it may blind us from the opportunity that's really ahead of us. And I would like to just iterate that, look, if we really want to put our energy into innovation, if we really want to drive and accelerate the fintech ecosystem, that we'll see this maturity start to play out. And the numbers we're seeing today will be quite low compared to what the potential is.
You think it's really an untapped area if from you being a platform and from
Absolutely.
what seeing over 3 billion and lots of money being moved on these platforms, you think we've not gotten there yet?
No, we're very far. And I mean, when we count the money moving through the platform, there's a lot of double counting as well. Because if I send you 100 CDs and you send it to your friend Kofi, and Kofi sends it to his friend, Amar Abna, that 100 CDs is now 400 CDs, but it's really 100 CDs, right? So you would see the 4.5 billion and these numbers, and there are a lot of numbers that are double counted in there. So yes, the transactional volumes are high, and I'm not discounting that at all, but the potential of that informal economy to become a formalized financial services economy is much, much, much larger. Yeah.
There was a recent report by the Bank of Ghana that highlighted how the sector, the platform is being infiltrated by fraudsters and all the rest. I mean, as the big player in this industry, are you worried by this?
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, fraud is something that, once you start to go digital, you're faced with a very different type of challenge, right? We can call it cybersecurity, where within the cybersecurity framework, fraud is one of the elements. The fraud we're seeing in Ghana is largely social engineering fraud. And social engineering thrives where there's a gap between the level of understanding and sophistication of consumers with the fraudsters, okay? So the immediate fix for something like this, as far as social engineering is concerned, is education. Education is the biggest barrier to fight social engineering, because as long as I'm educated about the risks of fraud and I'm more sophisticated as a consumer in that regard, I have a natural defense against the fraudsters. So we've spent a lot of time, pre-COVID, pushing out messages. During COVID, we increased that. We're on radio a few times, different channels. We had, quite a few different series of education. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to go to the ground. And the plan we had was really to be on the ground and work with community education groups within the communities to continue to educate, bring people together, in the evenings and talk about fraud and how they can prevent this. So that's one avenue, but obviously a singular effort on education will not be enough, right? We have to have other mechanisms to put in place to do this. So we're looking at other mechanisms. For example, how do we enhance the reporting of fraud? And how do we increase the punitive or the consequence when a fraudster is detected? So today as an industry, I can very easily register a SIM on MTN, port that SIM to another network, and call back as if I'm an MTN customer and pretend I'm even the MTN call center, right? So as an industry, we have to start to get coordinated in how we can create a centralized fraud management database, something that we're working through the telecoms chamber on currently, so that if I report a fraudster, their ID details are reported into that database, their registration details are reported into that database, and whatever network they're on, we can block that same fraudster. And once we start to get coordinated that way, then the consequence starts to go up. And you're actually solving a much broader problem than a network operator only problem. These fraudsters also would go beyond telcos. It's the same people doing things like the bank fraud and other types of fraud. So the more we can, again, if there is a way for, a bank to know that this specific individual was barred from the telcos because they did fraud, then they can also block them on that side. So, we have to have a much broader coordination if we're really going to arrest this, fraud situation in Ghana, right? But, obviously we have to take the lead, and we're putting a lot of effort in fighting this. we're also going to the point where we're now looking at other technologically driven mechanisms to be a little bit more effective in predicting trends, looking at networks of fraudsters to identify other fraudsters using artificial intelligence, for example, and using all these patterns and technology to help us be more effective. Today, if someone reports a fraud case, it's one number, and I block that one number. I blocked one person. But that person exists in a cohort of, say, 15 other fraudsters or 5 other fraudsters. And for the arrests that we've made so far, people work in groups of 5, 6, 10, depending on the size. So if you have some of these tools, then when you get one number reported, you can detect 5 to 10 other numbers that are also participating in fraud, and you can immediately eliminate them. And that way, our effectiveness increases 10 to
With respect to your additional, more of high-tech AI that we are planning to deploy, I remember in the stakeholder meetings you spoke about it. I mean, the economists would say, all other things being equal, when are we hoping that you would deploy this advanced AI system that would, again, help minimize this?
Sure. Look, I think somewhere in Q1, Q2 next year, this should be in place, and we should start seeing the impact of this in our fraud management. But in the meantime, we have other tools that are helping us to do similar things, but it won't be as sophisticated. We're trying to step this up a notch, right? And we're also looking at these initiatives around the industry coordination, also looking at education, and also looking at processes where we can automate more and have more security around processes that also allow some of these things to happen. So there are a number of things going on. I mean, for example, today if you registered a SIM card on MTN, we would actually check the validity of the ID on the originating database. So that prevents fake IDs, right? So that's one problem that we're attacking today. And pre-registered SIMs, for example, now you're going to have that original ID, because all those fake IDs that were being used, you can't do that anymore on our network. So there are a number of places that we're blocking the loopholes on, but we need something more holistic to be able to really bring this under control. But a lot of effort has gone in.
I'll be coming back again to
Sure.
also, if these are external measures that you're putting in place.
Absolutely.
If you go through the report, they also highlighted that there are some internal people that were collaborating
Sure.
with this. How are you also dealing with that? And I'll be getting more details. And also, as we focus much more on what is going to change going forward, as more people depend on tech stacks, mobile money, what will the MTN be doing going forward? We'll still have the same MTN, or things are going to change? This is PM Express Business Edition. As we look at mobile telephony in Ghana today, MTN, what is going to change going forward with the COVID-19 issues coming up? Are things going to be the same, or how they transact business with us, things are going to be different? We should take a short commercial break and we'll be right back. This is PM Express Business Edition. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. As you look at mobile telephony in Ghana today, what will change going forward? So I was talking about what you're doing internally as well. When I also found out in that report about the fact that there are people internally also aiding with these elements out there, I was quite worried. I mean, were you also worried? Well, what are you doing to deal with that? When as you deploy all these AI and all the rest to deal with the external issues, what about internally as well?
Sure. So look, you can't solve, the fraud problem without looking internally as well. And I think, every company who's looking at fraud, you have to make sure that your internal processes are tight enough that you can eliminate that source of fraud while you focus also on the external. So in our framework, we actually have a specific project looking at fraud. And in that framework, there are the internal mechanisms, external opportunities and initiatives. And internally, I talked a lot about our processes and how, when you think about automation of processes and removing the need for manual intervention at different points, that allows you to get tighter. It allows you to have, trails, digital trails of, what influences the system has received, what instructions the system has received from who specifically. And those digital trails allow you to clamp down a lot quicker on sources of internal fraud. So for us, these are things we take very seriously. We do have the ISO certifications and things like in terms of security, in terms of our internal processes, but those are not enough, right? So we have to be more critical about our internal process, and this is something that we continue to invest in on a daily basis.
Are you sanctioning people? Are you sacking people? Are you naming and shaming people internally?
Look, you can't fight. I think it's fair to say, as a company, MTN, even outside of more money fraud, right? We have to make sure that we have the right consequence for unethical behavior, and we don't take ethical behavior lightly at MTN in general. So things like sanctioning people and doing things like that is something that we do on a daily basis based on the types of situations that come up. So part of our status quo and our DNA is to be very tough on ethical issues. And this continues through
maybe because of
the life of the business.
The brand challenge that will come with doing that. George works with the Mobile Money Department of MTN. He's been flagged, he's been named and shamed. So you would want to manage some of these things. Maybe the time has come to show much commitment to this. Maybe
sure.
Name and shame.
I think as a business, we have to do the right thing, and the right thing is to make sure that our people follow the processes we've laid out, and we also make sure that we improve our processes to eliminate risk of compromise, right? And that's our commitment, and this is an area that we've spent a lot of time, and we continue to invest a lot of time and energy in. When I talked about the AI, artificial intelligence tool, we're also looking at other robotics tools. There's something called RPA, robotic process automation, which allows us to actually take internal processes and automate them as well. It's really to drive efficiency, it's to improve security and other things. These are all tools that we're looking at again coming into 2021. So we take these things very seriously at MTN, and you can count on us to continue to do so into the future.
So the customers and subscribers should be assured that going forward things will change in terms of me having somebody call me today and say that I am Michael calling from Sunyani, and sometimes it can be really frustrating.
Absolutely, absolutely. We completely understand. We get all the reports, and we're doing a lot of work, which is why we're working very hard with the Ghana Police today, and that collaboration has yielded very positive results. We're extending that to the courts, where we also have to get our court processes to adapt, so that it's quicker to be able to take action. And these are all things that need to happen systemically, which is why I said, the issue of fraud goes beyond an operator, because there are a lot of external systems that need to come together for the actions you take to actually be effective in a sustainable fashion. So we've seen a lot of cooperation, a lot of positive reaction to our approaches, and we're hopeful that once all of these things fall in place, we should see a very different fraud environment in this country.
Going forward, one would ask that what is going to change in terms of service offering, and because of what COVID has done? You are also very heavy in the data business as well. We saw a recent PwC report that said that more the banks are looking at working from home. Sure. I see with a bank that recently has had some serious technical problems, and it's been very frustrating for me. Those are the side effects of working from home and depending heavily on data. Going forward for you as a brand and as a group and all the rest, what is going to change? Looking at what COVID has done, and now people want to work from home, means that data will be very critical here, calling from the house and all the rest. For you, what will be the brand positioning going forward in terms of post-COVID that your customers and subscribers is looking forward eagerly as what is going to happen?
Okay. Look, we all know COVID has heightened the importance of the digital and the internet era, right? And businesses, consumers have all seen the increased need to be a lot more digital, to be able to operate more digitally, do things remotely, do things on the internet, do things on your phones. So for us, that's the need we have to try to satisfy as an operator. Our job is to make sure that people get the tools they need to facilitate what they want to do. So that's our primary objective, and it is our primary goal to be able to deliver that. In terms of our own vision, coming into 2020, we declared 2020 the year of the customer, the digital experience. And this was our theme for 2019, it was the year of the customer. So coming into 2020, we already had digital as a focal point for our strategy as far as the way forward. And we actually had laid out a 3-year strategy to become a digital operator. So part of that is being able to ensure that we can deliver our services to our customers through digital means, giving more control to our customers so they can interact with us through digital means. And I'll give a couple of examples very soon. But also internally, creating a more digital environment internally so we're more efficient, we're more agile, and we can do a lot more things with tracking and transparency and control. So the same principles apply back internally as well. So this is really where we're going. COVID has definitely accelerated that path because the need is immediate and therefore you have to react. But the goal is the same, and our vision has always been to become a digital operator. So thankfully, we're already on that path. The big question is, what does this mean to our investment strategy? And can we accelerate? Do we decelerate? What do we do as far as our investment strategy is concerned? And this is where the discussions largely are. The strategic intent stays the same as a digital operator in the next 3 years. But the path to achieving that has changed slightly because COVID has accelerated the demand and has also accelerated the need for us to have a lot more urgency in our transformation than we had planned for.
Moving from CAPEX and service offering and product offering as well, do I get the feeling that MTN is being overwhelmed by the demand? Because there are people who still complain to you that I cannot make 2 or 3 calls without having a call dropping. And it's a very, very big concern for the subscribers out there that they still think that they're not getting the best out of the brand, looking at the cost again. What do you make of these concerns out there? Do you do a customer survey to gauge consumer concerns and perception?
Sure. Look, we're very in touch with our customers on a daily basis. We have different polls that we do through our call center. So there'll be a cross section of customers who call through our call center and get targeted to give feedback on specifically what their experience is on MTN. We do regular surveys as well with customers. This happens repeatedly. We've had some disruption during the COVID period, but we haven't disengaged from our customers at all. So we understand what's going on. But a number of things I also want to point out, which is, some of these, they are geographic issues and they are systemic issues. Now, geographic issues will arise because you put a site in one location, but the range of the site does not cover a certain location. And we're expanding as a community. So you get new communities springing up, demand for services in those communities going up, and perhaps the implementation of new coverage to cover those communities is lagging behind, right? So we expect to see some of these problems. It's what type of issue is it? If it's a systemic issue that's broad across the network, then that has a much higher urgency because you're affecting a huge base.
Community.
If it's a localized issue, which is an issue from a problem on the site, then our team would respond to that very quickly. But if it's a localized issue, it's an issue of coverage, and it's just inadequate coverage, and that needs a much more extended plan. This is where our coverage plans for the next year, the next 6 months comes in. And typically we will share these plans on where we're bringing new coverage and continue to expand. So when I talked about the fact that there's a huge amount of investment required, today we still have 15% of the population with no coverage, right? And when we say no coverage, it doesn't mean that if you stand under some tree somewhere, you can't get a signal. That's exactly what I mean. So that person will complain about their service, but it's not always because there's a problem with the service. It's because we haven't extended the services that far. Today, for example, MTN has invested in over 400 rural sites to extend coverage to communities that before this investment did not have any coverage at all. But there's still 15% of the population without coverage.
Have you set any target for yourself that maybe by this number this year, we hope to reduce the call drop rates by a certain percentage, because it's also a big concern for subscribers out there?
Sure. Today our call drop rates are less than 1%.
Wow.
Right? So, it's actually, if I give you the actual technical number, it's somewhere around 0.5%. Okay? So we don't see a lot of drop calls systemic-wide. And that's why I said there are a lot of these things that are localized
Okay.
for specific problems. Some of them are issues with a radio access network for that location, which will be fixed, or some of them are more permanent because of the coverage. But we take these quite seriously. And you would see from the studies that were done last year, Ookla did an assessment of all the networks in Ghana, and MTN was the number one in voice and the number one in data on service availability and service resilience. So again, that goes to confirm Ookla is a world-acclaimed, independent, benchmarking company that has done this research. But we can't rest on our laurels, and I think that's the important thing. We have to keep investing. The demand is going up. Consumers are changing. We've just seen the new normal. People are moving to the home. But things that were done in person physically have also now shifted online. So the natural demand is going up, and therefore there'll be a lot more pressure on the telecoms infrastructure as well. And we have to keep the investments going, and we have to be strategic about how we use the technology, and that's really what our goal is.
For Kweku Mensah out there, he thinks that MTN is quite an expensive network.
Sure.
What do you say to that? And even the fact that being expensive, there are people out there who also think that they are not getting value for money. I mean, are these concerns justified, or maybe more education will also help?
Look, our customers are the reason we're in business, and if our customers say we're expensive, we can't really challenge them. So yes, the customer is always right. However, it's also driven by a lack of understanding of some of the offers that may have been designed for that specific customer. So a lot of the times what we find is people end up using their default plan, for example, when there are specific plans, specific bundles, free after one, things like Jara in specific areas, and there are other specific bundles that we have, bundling data and voice, combo bundles. We also have just for you bundles that looks at your specific segment, your specific behavior, and we design a bundle for you. These are all things that are available. So sometimes the gap between knowing that these things are available and using what has been set as a default is where the challenges are. So, again, we'll continue to make sure that we give value for money and design products and services that meet the needs of our customers. We have the Pulse bundle, for example, Mashup and things like this. These are all products that we've delivered to make our services affordable. And these are segmented offers for a specific segment of the population. So these are all things we have that will continue to make sure that our services are affordable to everyone. So hopefully with more education, if that person just comes to one of our service centers, we can walk them through some of the things that they can do to get the best bundles and offers for their specific use, if we understand their behaviors.
I'll be getting your thought on CST as was recently introduced, and for you, what do you make of it? There are even called from the telecom chamber that listen, for us to aid more use of this telecom service, maybe we should look at scrapping even the tax and all those things. I'll be getting more details on that as well, and this is a PM Express Business Edition as we look at telecom business in this country, MTN, and what would change actually. We'll take a short commercial break and we'll be right back as you wrap up this discussion on post-COVID-19 and telecom business in this country. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we look at telecom business in this country and what would change going forward because of COVID-19. We are privileged to have the Chief Executive of MTN Ghana. What are they going to do as one of the biggest player in this whole telecom business in this country? So I was looking at CSTs taking off for you. How is the implementation going? I know that some of this has to do with calibrating systems and all the rest. And the people who were, I knew a friend who said that, George, I bought enough credit. I was waiting for 1 a.m. Then I load all those things and I start benefiting from it. How has it been in terms of rolling out this since you had maybe enough time to work on all these things?
Sure, look, it's been very smooth. This time around, we obviously have already implemented the CST and it's all live now, reduction from 9% to 5%. I would say the technical teams have done a fantastic job in making sure it's been seamless, and you woke up in the morning on the 15th and you didn't realize anything had changed from an experience standpoint. So, we're grateful to the team for the hard work and for the diligent work in implementing this. As far as MTN's approach to this, it's been, we've reduced the CST from 9% to 5%, as was directed. But what we've also done is we've given till the end of the year, we've given a 5% bonus on recharge back to our customers. So that effectively, is an absorption of the CST for the next 6 months. Again, as part of our Yellow Care office, as part of COVID, to ease the burden on customers till the end of the year. So this is what we've added in terms of that implementation for now. So.
For you, has it been that smooth for you? I would say that, and it might be early days yet, but have you seen some spike in traffic where people would argue about a price being a very major concern? So if the price is quite low, I'll be very active on the network.
No, it's early days. It's early days yet. But I think basically what happens is, because this is a benefit that has been passed through directly to consumers, consumers will continue to use this benefit in the ways that matter to them. So I'm not expecting to see a spike in traffic, even though it's early days. I think basically what you'd see is people's spend will go a little bit longer. So it's more a time issue than a spike issue, I think, is what we should see. So.
There are people who think that, MTN, a great brand, you've grown. They say that big is beautiful and something big is good, but sometimes big can be ugly. And so they are concerned that MTN has become too big, that very, very more critical things, you're not paying attention to it. What do you say to these concerns that you become too huge?
Look, I think it's important as a company, as you continue to grow, to focus on the fundamentals. And when we talk about becoming a digital operator, that's exactly what we're doing. We're saying, how do I enhance the service that I give to my customers? What's the fundamental philosophy behind becoming a digital operator? The first one is, a lot of the times when there's a gap in your understanding, a consumer understands something a certain way and the company understands it a different way, then you have an issue of trust, and it forms into a little bit of a black hole. So going digital means I'm putting a lot of control into the hands of my consumer. Today, if you look at what we've done with my MTN app, which we relaunched in October last year, every month we release new features. And slowly you can check your bills, you can check your Momo statements very soon, and you would see exactly how you're managing your spend. We actually want to take this up, 2 or 3 levels where we can actually help you control your spend. Where, for example, if you're consuming a certain number of MBs of data, we can send you an alert to say, hey, in the last 4 hours, we've noticed this huge consumption of data, and we can help you that way. So that's really where we're going. That's the vision, where we can get to a point where when things are happening on your device, we're able to support you to have the visibility of what's happening. A lot of the times, the telco gets blamed for things that we probably don't have control over. I'm not saying we're innocent in everything, but there are also a lot of things that don't originate from us that we seem to get the blame from. We seem to get the blame for. Recently, a couple of days ago, a good friend of mine sent me a WhatsApp, really upset about one of our products that had consumed all their data within a number of hours, and I thought it was very surprising. So we've looked at some of these things, and we've actually seen exactly what happened. The guy uses an Apple device, and Apple was synchronizing Apple Store apps, which are default on the phone. So for a situation like this, for example, if you come into one of our stores, we can help you disable apps that you don't use on a regular basis so that it doesn't have a need to update itself or synchronize. And these are things that happen sometimes in the background. I'm talking 22 gigs of iOS updates. It's almost unbelievable that you can actually have 22 gigs of iOS updates. But that's the extent to which the apps on the phone were synchronizing with the Apple Store. And MTN has zero control over that. But as an operator, We're concerned about that. So what can we do to support this customer? And, today we're looking at, are there tools that we can build into my MTN, for example, where my MTN can monitor activity on the phone? And if we see such a situation where between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. one morning, we suddenly see 2-3 gigs of downloads, we can alert you and say, hey, we're seeing a heavy download, on your phone. Is this something you want to continue? We can stop or start, things like that. So we have to get to the point where we're able to support the customer beyond our domain of control, right? To the point we're able to support on basic Android and iOS in this format, because we get the blame for a lot of these, and it's not always the case. There are situations where, yes, we do have some issues that we try to resolve, and we'll continue to improve in that area. So, it's quite an important space for us to get into, to give our customers the visibility, be transparent with them, ensure that they have everything they need at the click of a button without having to depend so much on us to see very basic.
MTN, what has been your relations with local authorities, regulators, and maybe let me say government? In other markets, certain giants in the industry are blamed of being so big and rude to all these kind of regulators. How has been your relationship like with local authorities, where you put up masks, you bulldoze your way through regulators and government? How has it been like?
Look, I think in general we have a good relationship with our regulators. Of course, when you work in an environment where your ambitions may not always be aligned across all the stakeholders, you do have points of difference and you do have points of disagreement. But it's part of running a business, and I don't think there are any environments where everything would always be perfectly aligned. But there's a way to deal with it, and so far I would say our relationship has been good. Yes, we do have some points of difference and disagreement, and we currently have the issue of SMP, which we have a disagreement on. But I don't think that should take away the fact that the relationship in itself, outside of the issue, is in a good place, and we have to recognize that we can't define the relationship by the specific issues we disagree on. And I think that's an important thing for us all to note.
You don't think that maybe you're being arrogant to some of these players, and that is why a local authority will always want to come hard at you when you're putting up a mast and all the rest, and all these things? And that's why maybe whether the question has not been framed, whether is the relationship that smooth, that cordial, or very abrasive, I'm a big brand, and maybe that's why a local authority will also want to take you on.
Sure. Look, I know the team I work with, and I have zero reason to believe that we exude arrogance when we have these engagements. And secondly, none of my regulators has come to me to say that MTN is being arrogant. So again, I want to believe that what we hear is the truth and is the reality. And when I look at how we engage, again, I have zero reason to believe that we're arrogant. But in the example you gave around sort of the mast and things like that, there are also things that are industry specific, right? And I've seen a lot of these issues that are much broader than MTN. So I'll be surprised if it's an issue of arrogance at all. I don't think that's the case. We're in a business of making sure we support government to achieve government's digital agenda. And I have to say, if you look at what we've put into our business in terms of our investments, in terms of our structures, in terms of our strategy, and where we want to go, it's aligned to the needs of this country from a digital and telecommunications standpoint. And that commitment for us is absolutely critical. We see ourselves as an enabler. We see ourselves as a critical service. And we want to continue to put our money where our mouth is from that perspective, and invest to meet those goals.
I get from you about the principle of disagreements and how things should be done. And some are saying that SMP, taking it to the highest court, that could be a tricky one, some would say.
Sure, look, we're currently in a legal process, so I would like not to comment on this, and I don't think I should. But I think it's important for us to continue to dialogue with our regulators, with our stakeholders. And today we have those forums. We're currently in discussions with the regulators and the dialogue and other stakeholders. And whatever issues we have as an industry, it's important that we're able to talk through them. And I'm hopeful that we will solve this problem amicably.
Are you worried as a brand? Because I know investors who were all over. What is happening? What will happen to the brand going forward? Are you worried about this because of all the calls coming in from investors?
Sure. Look, MTN is a listed company on the Ghana Stock Exchange. And anytime there is any public disclosure, especially a disclosure on a topic that's very significant, investors will be concerned. But I also, I would like to also emphasize that at times we look at these issues as an MTN issue. MTN is a brand that's, Pan-African and global, in the Middle East as well currently. And when investors are looking into markets, they look at some of these signals, not because they have an interest in telecoms per se, but because they have an interest in the country. So I think it's really important for us to recognize that, the concerns may be as a result of a situation that MTN is in, but the considerations from investors are broader than that. And it should be a concern for all of us that, these events could send the wrong signal for what we are trying to do as a business, as a country, in attracting investors to the country to do all sorts of things in the marketplace. So it's a risk not only for MTN, but it's also a risk for the country when these things are perceived in this way. If I look at what the objectives of government is around promoting business and things like that, the intent is absolutely not what the investors may see. And it will be a shame if they interpret some of these signals contrary to what the intent of government is in terms of being an attractive place for investors.
But I get from you that the flaw is there for that active engagement with the regulator to ensure that the bigger picture is looked at.
Yeah, the flaw is not there. We're on the floor and we're having discussions. So yes.
Let's talk about investors and listing. Do you think that the correction is taking place? You went to the market, we're all excited. A lot of Ghanaians went in to buy the shares. You've seen some significant reduction in the share price as well. There are some who say that maybe the correction is taking place. Or do you think that the investors don't appreciate some of these things and that's why we're seeing this?
Look, we've lost, 20-something% share value since we listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange. And you have to realize a number of things. If the business performance was not good, then we will start to correlate what management is doing to the impact on the Ghana Stock Exchange. But today it's very clear that what's happening with the business is very different from what's happening to the stock price, which in very simplistic terms points to other external factors that are influencing the trend on the Ghana Stock Exchange. And we've been working with the Ghana Stock Exchange, the SEC, to think through mechanisms to try to influence some of these economic factors and external factors more broadly. You would also realize that MTN is not the only company that have been exposed to these trends, right? So there's something more systemic that accounts for the trend that we're seeing. As management, for us, our core objective is to make sure we focus on the business and we keep the performance of the business on the right track, because ultimately that's what we control. And then work with other parties to make sure we get the right environment so that the attractiveness of the environment for investors is right. And once we get that right, we will see a lot more of these trends change. Some examples and some other influences. Anytime you have a shock to a system, COVID was a shock to a system, right? It's unprecedented. We have some investors who have looked at their investments in Ghana and categorized it as a risk. The expectation during COVID was that Africa and African countries would be completely disseminated. So people also rushed to pull their money out, and they pull their money out desperately at low prices, which influences and depresses the overall stock price. And again, we'll see this as a mechanism and a feature across the stock market in general. I'm very hopeful that the correction you talked about is actually now about to happen, where the stock price will go up and reflect the actual business trends. And that's really the correction that we are looking for, and we expect it to happen going forward. You
think that going on the market will also deal with concerns about transparency? The industry has been tagged, not just MTN, about and the declaration of taxes and all the rest. And again, you are a listed company. I believe that some of these things will get worried to you, even though in the past you've been declared as one of the biggest taxpayers and all the rest. Are you worried about some of these tax that you've seen that you are not declaring all the taxes? There are some underhand dealings and all the rest, but you are listed on the stock exchange as well.
Sure, look, I think as an operator and as a responsible company, we need to focus on what we do and control. Even before we listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange, if you look at our audit partnerships and the reputations of the audit firms that we employ, it's right up there. We go with the best. And the reason for that is, we don't need to list on the stock exchange to be transparent, right? We've always been a transparent company, and that hasn't changed since the listing. So we'll continue to be a responsible company, and we have nothing to hide, and we'll continue to do what's right.
As a brand, finally, as you wrap on this discussion, as a brand, are you worried about the perceptions and the reputational issues and the reality on the ground? People complain about the brand being expensive. People complain about being shortchanged. You are now being tagged. Perception that you were too big and a little bit of arrogant, and the perception somewhere that let's cut the brands into size and all the rest. But the reality could also be about the cost of data cuts and all the rest, and delivering all these services to subscribers and all the rest. That perception, reality. How do you see this as a very big challenge for you that you have to work hard to deal with it?
There's a saying that says perception is reality, and we will be fooling ourselves if the assurance we have based on what we experience and go through internally is all we care about, right? You can't. We have to take comfort in the fact that we're doing the right thing, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't put an effort into educating externally what that right thing is, and to do that deliberately means that you're concerned about the external perception. And as a company, as a brand, it's extremely important what the external perception is. From everything you've listed, absolutely important for us. And we put in a lot of effort to make sure that the reality is much better understood, and the correlation between the perception and the reality is much tighter. Now, there will be a huge dimension of things where the perception and reality are exactly the same or close enough. And there are maybe 3 or 4 that there are some gaps, and we have to focus on closing that gaps. And it's an education, it's sharing more. When we do programs like Editors Forum, that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to make sure that the reality is better understood, so that the perception and the reality get much closer together. But as a company, it's our responsibility, and we'll continue to make sure that we do that.
Your final words to subscribers out there, those millions of subscribers out there who are looking forward to a better or maybe more from you as a provider.
Sure. Look, I think to just a couple of words to our customers, our cherished customers. We continue to believe in you, and we thank you for all your service. And when we say we day for you, we really mean we day for you. And you can expect more great things from MTN, innovations in Q4 coming up to Christmas as well from us. And please remember, today, every time you recharge, you get a 5% bonus on your recharge. It's just a little thank you for your loyalty. And we wish you all the best. Stay safe and wear your mask. Wear it for me. Thank you.
Well, all too soon we have to draw the curtain down on PM Express Business Edition. I hope you've been enlightened and educated and more armed as a subscriber going forward. What will change from this brand, one of the biggest brands in this industry? My name is George. I've been engaging the Chief Executive of MTN Ghana, Selo Madadi. For well, we draw the curtain down. Have a great day. This is PM Express Business Edition.